know how it is when you're booking a trip. You're getting confirmation emails left and right from hotels, from airlines, from rental car companies. Wouldn't it be great if all of that could somehow be automatically put into an itinerary so you had everything you needed exactly when you needed to know it? Well, guess what? That's exactly what TripWaffle does. It is a free app. Before you roll your eyes and think, no, not another app, this one's free. I highly suggest you give it a go. You can literally forward any travel-related email, and TripWaffle will automatically turn it into an easy-to-read plan, complete with timely reminders, useful insights, and an itinerary that's a pleasure to use. I got an email from a listener, Larry, who said, wow, thank you. I loaded a trip on TripWaffle, 6 flights, 5 hotels. Amazing way to track. So easy. I've tried it as well, and it works great. Go to tripwaffle.com or search for TripWaffle on the app stores. Throw some older upcoming booking emails at it and see what it can do. Thanks to TripWaffle for supporting today's show.
The new LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't undo your last hire, the no-show. Who set you back because they didn't show up on day 1, or day 2, or ever again. And now your product launch is delayed because you're talking to alien abduction podcasters to track them down. But LinkedIn Hiring Pro can help make sure your next hire sticks. In fact, businesses who use LinkedIn are 24% less likely to reopen a role in the next 12 months. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
I felt the need to just switch off from that news cycle. I did understand the irony of going to a country that just had a violent conflict in which school kids were shot dead and led to retribution attacks and the overthrowing or the resignation of the government. It's been titled the Gen Z Revolution, though I again think that's a media oversimplification. I understood that irony, but to be honest, I was more interested in being on the ground and talking to young Nepali people who might have been part of that movement than I was in reading the New York Times or Facebook or The Guardian.
That is today's guest, Tony Fletcher. He reached out to me fresh off of a life-changing trip to Nepal, where he went offline for 2 weeks. No email, social media, phone calls, no news. In this day and age, I'd say 2 weeks is a pretty solid chunk of time away from all things internet. He's going to share some of his biggest lessons learned around being unplugged, how it shaped his travel experience on the ground, and perhaps this may inspire you to plan your first or next offline detox, unplugged trip, digital reset, whatever you want to call it. I am friends with Tony, and I know that this month in Nepal was really impactful for him. It made a huge impact on his life, and I've also had the privilege of visiting Nepal and being deeply affected by my time there, which is why in this conversation you're going to hear us exchange some of our memorable stories and on-the-ground experiences, and through the process, you'll discover some of the places we visited and perhaps give you some ideas for a visit of your own. And I don't know about you, but I always enjoy, or perhaps I need, to be reminded of the fact that as humans, as travelers, we are capable of more than we even think we are capable of.
As I found when we took that round the world trip, when you're not on your trip, it looks daunting. Once you undertake the trip, and I'm talking about getting on the plane to go somewhere, but I'm also talking about leaving my hotel and starting the trek. Once you actually get out and do that thing that you wanted to do, you realize you can do it.
You'll also get a breakdown of some of the more popular treks to take in Nepal, and you'll hear about something Tony did when he was trekking, which of course is a wildly popular thing to do in Nepal. But he did something almost no Westerners do, which can really help you avoid, at least for a period of time, some of the big tourist trekking crowds. You'll even get a little bit of packing advice and loads more. It's all happening in this episode right now. So buckle up, strap in, grab your trekking poles. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. And I wanted to get this one out now because Nepal's trekking season where you get the best weather. Those windows are generally September through November and March through May. So perhaps if you have an opening in your calendar and this is something you've always wanted to do, I hope this episode will help you. I also have an entire series I did called Trekking Nepal, Your Adventure Guide. Another podcast I did back in, 2015 or something, if you want to follow along on a trek that me and my wife did in Nepal and hear about our experience on the ground. You can check that out. We can link up to it. And Tony Fletcher is here today, as I mentioned. This dude, he's a legendary music journalist. From his early days publishing a hugely popular fanzine to his work as a best-selling writer of some big music biographies for major artists, including R.E.M. and Keith Moon. He's also a musician himself, and he's become a good friend over the years. We've bonded over our shared love of music and travel. You can find his work at tonyfletcher.substack.com. Encourage you to sign up over there. And we also have a newsletter here at Zero to Travel. If you want to stay in touch off the pod, zerototravel.com/newsletter. Without further ado, we're going to jump into this conversation. I'll wrap this one up with a nice quote that is tied in with what I said at the top, that idea of being capable of more than we even think we are sometimes. It's always nice to be reminded of that, and I know I need that personally. So anyway, please enjoy this episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the other side, my friend. Cheers. You're an honored guest. Back on the podcast, my good buddy, Tony Fletcher. Welcome back to the show, man.
Hey, Jason, it's so lovely to see you again. How are you?
I'm great. We were having some regular calls. We were actually talking about doing a project together. So we were getting used to seeing each other, and now it's been a little while since we have connected. And then you sent me, we're still in touch, but then you sent me this email talking about your recent trip to Nepal and how you decided to unplug for the trip and all of these. And I said, there was a lot to unpack and we wanted to do it while it was fresh. So that's why you're here. By the way, Tony, you've got a great Substack. If people want to follow it, tonyfletcher.substack.com. We can link up to that. A lot of music stuff. You come from the music world. So that was a big thing we had in common. And I mean, this conversation could easily veer off into musical territory, but we're going to do our best to keep it on travel.
Yeah, I think we can. You when I was on before, and it must have been at least 3 years back, maybe more than that. But you talked a lot about my writing career, my music career, and that was wonderful. And people got in touch with me after that show, and I was really, really happy to do it. I think you were like a really, really good interviewer. And this Nepal one, I just thought, when you've been, you've got, we were working on a project together that didn't come off, but you've got your own project now. Smartphone habits reboot. And when I was reading your emails, which you've been sending to your regular listeners, I was like, he's going to want to know about me switching off for 2 weeks. He really, really is. It's perfect timing. So yeah, it's great. It's lovely to be back here.
I want you to share your experience for the listeners here as maybe perhaps this is a framework for people who have a trip coming up, relatively soon. Like, first of all, you're running your Substack, you're doing different things. Everybody, whether they're an employee or an entrepreneur or a solopreneur, they have their responsibilities. And that's, I think, one of the things that really keeps us tethered to our phones and to our digital connections. It's more than that. Of course, you have people you want to stay in touch with, and then you have the logistics of travel. But a lot of times it's the work stuff, and it's been harder and harder to kind of step away from that. And so I think this is going to be a mix of sort of, I want to hear about the mental health aspects of this unplugging and kind of how it affected your travel experience on the ground also. But I think within that, we're going to get some practical stuff for how to prepare for something like this. So I guess, first of all, you went to Nepal. I mean, give us the sort of the overview of the trip, which we're going to talk about Nepal as a destination. And I want to hear about the unique way you kind of approached this trek. But if you just give us some context for this, and then I want to talk about the unplugging aspect, and then we'll talk a bit about the destination.
Sure. The context of it. The reason I was really on your podcast last time round was to talk about the year of travel that I took in 2016, backpacking with my my now ex-wife and our then 11-year-old younger son, where we spent 10 and a half months backpacking around the world. And that was a life-changing experience. And I opened up to you about a lot of honest things on that, and how it actually did change my life in terms of no longer being married, and yet that being an incredibly positive trip, which sounds contradictory, but if somebody wants to go back and listen, they'll understand why it actually wasn't. And we did go to Nepal during that time. We went in March of that year, and it was less than a year after the earthquake and of 2015. There was still an awful lot of damage there. The incompetence, and it is incompetence and dysfunction of the governments there, meant that there was a tent city in Badrinath, the northeastern part of Kathmandu, where we were staying, where the big Buddhist stupa is. That tent city was about to go through its second monsoon, which was just awful. And it was also, there was enormous, incredible pollution, which is a problem in Kathmandu anyway. It's not all Nepal's fault. There's an enormous belt of pollution that comes up from this belt that extends from Pakistan through northern India and Bangladesh, and it sits in the Kathmandu Valley until the monsoon rains come, and we sort of timed that badly. So we were actually, the only time in 10 and a half months we were physically sick was the day we landed in Kathmandu, and this pollution just hit us, just the smell of it, the toxic nature. And so it had always been, but we had this wonderful time because we got out of Kathmandu very quickly, went to Pokhara, the second city, very sort of touristy, smaller city, a lot of people may know by name. And then we went on the Annapurna base camp trek, had the most incredible time. And before I went away, I actually had dinner with my ex-wife and now 20-year-old kid. And we all agreed that was kind of the highlight in more ways than one of our a year away. And I wanted to go back to Nepal. Funnily enough, and I won't get on too much of a tangent, I planned to go to Peru. I realized I finally had been able to, at the end of a difficult year, my mother passed away at the start of this year. I've been a parent for over 30 years, actively a parent for over 30 years, and I don't take these long personal breaks. I go back to England, I'll scoot off for a week or two somewhere at most, but I've never taken, literally at the age, in my 60s now, not taken this sort of month-long, I'm going on my own. And I had a manuscript, a book to edit that's coming out next year. It's a second memoir. And I finally got the deal for it and needed to chisel it into better shape. And I sort of realized I didn't want to be at my desk. And I used that as the launching pad as an excuse to go away somewhere interesting at the end of a sort of very major year. And everything was pointing to Peru. Except the cost of the airfares, which seemed to go up every time I thought about actually bringing a bag with me. and at the last minute, I was like, what does it cost to go to Kathmandu right now? And I looked it up, and it was exactly the same price. And I got 2 suitcases. I only used one, but I got to bring 2 suitcases. And the flights were sort of a straight shot, a layover in Doha of 2 hours versus having to, get out at Lima, completely, different airlines, whatever. And so I suddenly said, this is it. And the other thing was, I looked up the weather, and whereas the weather in Cusco was going to be, not ideal in November, the weather in Kathmandu and in general in Nepal and for trekking is perfect in November. Like, there is zero rain in November. There actually was rain when I landed because a cyclone came through, but it was gone by November 2nd. And that helped just convince me. I said, great, I'm actually going to go back and see this country 9 years down the line. The weather will be better. There shouldn't be pollution. There's been no earthquake. There has been a revolution in the last few weeks, which it probably explains why the airfares are low. And next I knew, off I went. And I went back to Badrinath, depending. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it. That was its own place for a long time, but like many cities, it's been engulfed by Kathmandu, by a bigger capital city. There is this enormous, incredible, beautiful Buddhist stupa there. It's a Tibetan Buddhist area. It's one of 7 UNESCO World Heritage Sites in the Kathmandu Valley, which is more concentrated than any other country on Earth, any other area on Earth. And we had stayed close to that before, but this time I stayed like right on the circle that goes around the stupa. And I spent my first week there and my last week there. And then I had always thought I wanted to be, one reason I was looking at Cusco, I'm a runner, I'm a hiker. I wanted to climb mountains, do getaway. I thought in Cusco it might be day trips, but even before I got to Nepal, I got a book out the library on trekking in Nepal and took it with me. And after being in Baldanath for a week, I went and did a 2-week trip into the Langtang Valley. And I did it an interesting way.
Earmark that. We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the basics. And then I came back and spent my last week in Balda.
Okay. Yeah, that stupa isn't it just wonderful to walk around that?
It really is. And you fall into it. So you've been there, right?
Yeah. It's just so, I don't know. It's such a peaceful feeling to just walk in circles around
it is
stupa.
Unbelievably peaceful. And I don't think there's anything. I met a couple of people, I met lots of young people on the trek, but I met someone from Belgium that was really smart and interesting. And he had like 2 days left when he got down from the trek. And I said, go over to the stupa. And as I was describing it, he said, well, I don't want to be one of these sort of cultural, I don't want to interfere. And I said, it's not that. You'll go there. There's lots of different people. Young people come out for their Instagram photos these days, but you will find yourself just everybody's doing their own thing, and you just fall into this. Let me walk around the stupa and spin some prayer wheels and put some positive thoughts out into the universe. And now I get this. Now it's like you fall into it, and you're right. It is so peaceful there. So spiritual. And the strange thing is, Jason, that main south entrance to it is like 10 meters from the Bauda Road, where it's just horns and motorbikes, scooters. And you don't hear any of that once you walk those 10 meters. And it's not like there's a on-off switch, but it's like something spiritual switches an off switch. And you wouldn't know that you are like that close to a traffic jam. It's amazing.
Right. That's true. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, you hear some of the peripheral chanting going on and different, there's a sort of like the sonic atmosphere is interesting as well.
The busy time at the stupa is dawn and dusk. And that's particularly at dawn, you get the monasteries opening up. There's 2 of them on the actual sort of circle that goes around it. And they have services that you hear. They're playing the horns. They're playing the ritual music. They're doing their chanting. And then in the evenings, there's often some kind of ceremony that I think if you were a Tibetan Buddhist, you would know why it was this evening and not tomorrow evening. And but similarly, you get that out right outside as well. And there were even a couple of wedding marches went round one day as well, which was enormous fun. Brass bands. It was apparently the Tuesday I was back in Boulder was an auspicious day to get married. So all day long I was hearing these brass bands and watching married couples walk around as well. So it's a very different vibe. It was sweet.
Oh, nice, man. That's great. I mean, the Buddha, the stupa itself, is so impressive when you walk in. But then it's all of the other things too. You got you're walking around with this just groups of humans, and there is something magical about it. There is, what do we call it, like a Zen euphoria, maybe? I don't know.
Oh, Zen Euphoria. That's a great name for a band, Jason. Zen Euphoria. You've got to...
I've been doing that a lot lately. We both play in bands, and I sometimes I'm like, hey, that's a good song title. That's a good band name.
I write down all my song titles now.
I have a running list of those.
Yeah, but Zen Euphoria is great. It's a good way of putting it, because the euphoria is very internal. You're actually being very Zen. It's not a place to shout and make a fool of yourself. And it should be said, I'm sure most people wouldn't know, because we didn't when we got there 9 years ago. You circumambulate the Buddhist stupas in a clockwise direction. You need to keep the spiritual symbol to your right. So that also applies at times when you're sort of on a trek and you've got maybe a prayer wall that has 2 ways around it. You want to keep it on your right as you go up and your right as you come down. But So yeah, it's very zen in that it's very quiet apart from the chanting or what you might hear from the monasteries. But there is an inner something going on inside. And similarly, I do want to say when we were there 9 years ago, the stupa was very badly damaged in the earthquake. The beautiful spire steeple at the top, the eyes of the Buddha that are symbolic and seen on lots of images of Nepal. It was badly damaged, and it actually got repaired, and it was the first major monument to reopen, and that's because it was done privately without help from the government, basically. But it meant it had scaffolding around it when we were there 9 years ago. And although you could access and walk around, there was a sort of mournful feeling I felt with the pollution and the grey skies, that, you had a sense that all was not right. Which didn't stop people, of course, circumambulating in prayer to make the world right. And so to see it restored to its glory in sunshine was just wonderful. I mean, the moment I got there, I just felt like, oh my gosh, this is why I came to see this. And I had thought about staying in other places, just going off to Bhaktapur for a couple of nights, something like that. And I ended up spending that entire first and last weeks in Boulder at two different guest houses on the stupa, because I was just so happy there, and at peace, very, very much at peace as well.
Definitely a place to check out. Isn't circumambulation a great word?
Yeah. I had to. I think I was calling it circumambulate. I'm only the writer here. It is a great word. I learned more about it when I picked up a book from one of the little guest house libraries called "How to Circumambulate a Stupa."
Okay, yeah, that's a very practical, specific guide.
Yes. Yeah, really. There is so much Buddhist literature. There really is. But yeah, that was an interesting one. And it also got into the whys, but it was how to, about applying yourself and not being a tourist. But in fairness, I think that could be applied to many of the young Nepalis who, like I say, they come out on a beautiful evening, and and morning and daytime and weekend, they Instagram hell out of themselves. Or TikTok, whatever they're doing. Whatever the kids are doing these days, Jason.
Yeah, now you sound old. No.
I do, don't I?
We'll get back to the interview in just a moment. I really enjoy the planning stage of a trip, piecing together that itinerary that sets you up for this epic travel experience. You probably already know that travel advisors actually earn a living planning trips for others doing that exact thing, but what you might not know is how easy it is for you to take your travel planning skills and earn income from them by planning vacations for others with Fora. Fora is a modern travel agency built for people who love to plan travel and help others travel well. Their tech platform, training, and community give you everything you need to turn your passion for travel planning into a flexible, meaningful stream of income. No need to figure everything out on your own with a Fora subscription. Everything you need to run a travel business lives under one roof. You can finally turn your passion for travel into a fulfilling business with Fora. Become a Fora advisor today at foratravel.com/0to-travel. That's Fora, Fora travel.com/0to-travel. Make sure you tell them we sent you, foratravel.com/0to-travel.
The new LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't undo your last hire, the no-show. Who set you back because they didn't show up on day one, or day two, or ever again. And now your product launch is delayed because you're talking to alien abduction podcasters to track them down. But LinkedIn Hiring Pro can help make sure your next hire sticks. In fact, businesses who use LinkedIn are 24% less likely to reopen a role in the next 12 months. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
Now, back to the show. I want to talk about the unplugging in a second, but I will share my biggest Pokhara memory in that city. That is where my wife got sick, and she sent me on what was perhaps the most difficult travel mission I have ever embarked on. I'm being sarcastic, but she wanted me to get her. She wanted something very specific because of the way her stomach felt, and she wanted, I think, a pancake with Nutella and a Sprite. And I'm like, oh, that will be easy to find, maybe. I don't know. I could hit one of those tourist spots. I'm sure that, about 2 hours later, I ran all over town to look for these things and finally did find them. I think I came back 2 or 3 hours later. And then she just left it untouched, like her stomach.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
She didn't want it at all. That's not even like,
gosh.
she's not like a diva like that or anything, but it was just a funny story. We still talk about it today.
Yeah, I'm thinking pancakes are everywhere, but that's very specific. Nutella.
It was with
and
Nutella and a Sprite. So yeah, maybe I should serve that to her on the next holiday meal or something. I don't know if you did decide, you made the conscious decision to switch offline for 2 weeks. You said you planned it in the email. I don't know how committed you were from a mindset perspective. I don't know how you set yourself up for that. Why the decision, and what were some of like the big lessons coming out of that? And I'm really fishing for a mix of sort of advice and perhaps inspiration for anybody listening that wants to unplug for a period of time while they're traveling.
Sure thing. I gave you a couple of the reasons for going away. There was another reason. I live in the States, and the States, and indeed the world, is going through a very, very, very difficult time. And the news is painful every day. It really feels, dystopian, Orwellian. It's horrible, and it feels worse here, but it's pretty bad everywhere. It feels like difficult times, and every expert that I do read, warns that we're headed the wrong way. That we're headed towards global conflicts and all, and definitely ecological disaster, et cetera, And I've always been a news hound. I've been actively engaged at times in my life politically. I've always wanted to stay informed. And it's so easy to get trapped into that negative news cycle. And it is so different. I don't mind showing my age, because there were a lot of things that struck me about going on this trip. And, I grew up at a time in a country, the UK, where, we had 3 TV channels. And, the news came on every few hours. And yes, my mother got a newspaper, but we weren't being bombarded with news all the time. And news media gravitates to the bad news. The old man bites dog, dog bites man. One of those is a headline, one is not. And so I'm not blaming the media, but I am blaming the surfeit of media and our ability to be connected worldwide, which obviously has so many advantages, but it also means we just get caught in what's the new bad news. And then a particular, it's a frustration of mine, but, coming back from this trip, I'm trying not to judge. And even on the trip, I was trying not to judge. But really good people who go on, particularly, of my crowd, Facebook, and sort of just hourly and certainly daily, like unravel and put out their thoughts on what's going on. And I maintain you're not going to change the world on Facebook. And this kind of like commentary, and the way that something like Facebook brings out the road rage in people, that idea that people are really nice until they get behind the wheel of a car. I feel similarly about social media, and we all know it. There's so many people that I know, who are great people, but put them on social media, it's like red rag to a bull. They're suddenly shouting at people, and you're like, this is not the same person. And I really, really wanted to get away from all of this. I've been growing increasingly almost disappointed with myself for feeling I need social media, like I need it to promote my Substack, when in fact Facebook and Instagram have algorithms now built in to not promote external links to Substack. So I'm fighting a losing battle. And I felt the need to just switch off from that news cycle. I did understand the irony of going to a country that just had a violent conflict in which school kids were shot dead and led to retribution attacks and the overthrowing or the resignation of the government. It's been titled the Gen Z Revolution, though I again think that's a media oversimplification. I understood that irony, but to be honest, I was more interested in being on the ground and talking to young Nepali people who might have been part of that movement than I was in reading the New York Times or Facebook or The Guardian. And I also, what came to mind is there are countries that enforce you to take holidays. I don't know if Norway is one of them, but certainly somewhere like Germany, where you get 6-7 weeks of holiday a year. It's now as far as I know, become mandatory that, you're disconnected from your work email. And I get this a lot when I deal with the UK. I'm not in the office today, deal with somebody else. We are, particularly those of us who are self-employed, but it's true of a lot of employed people, especially in the States. It's just this idea you're on call 24 hours a day and you never stop working. And I'm a workaholic, so I'm very prone to that. And I just felt, I want to go back to what it was like when I was younger, where you went on holiday and that was it. If you called your friend over the summer and you said to us, and you're like, oh, is so-and-so around? And they're like, no, didn't they've gone to France for 2 weeks. It's like, oh, when are they back? And you try and remember the date and you call them when you got back, when they got back. And we've lost that. We've really, really lost that. And then, indeed, a lot of the people that I saw on the trek were on their phones in the tea houses in the evenings. And again, I'm not judging. There's a multitude of their own reasons, and they may be enjoying the experience. I wanted to switch off. And when I set off on the trek, I actually had got a different phone. I got my son's iPhone to have a better camera. I basically bought it from him. And I did not install Facebook. And what I did do when I went on the trek, I didn't sort of black box them, but I made sure that the front page of my phone was things I wanted to use. And I would have been genuinely lost without my Cowtopo map app. So it's not like I didn't use my phone. There is a funny story about how I very, very, very nearly lost that brand new iPhone for good, only 1 week into the trek. But I did use the phone, but I avoided everything, email, WhatsApp. I had my phone messages switched off because I was using a local SIM card. Absolutely no social media, no news of any kind. And interestingly, I barely discussed the news with other trekkers. That's a point we could follow up on. And the only exception was 1 week through the trek, which I thought was going to be the harder week. I said I'd let my partner know I got through it because I was doing something a bit unusual. And interestingly, it was an evening when the Wi-Fi wasn't working properly at this tea house. And it took me about an hour or 2 hours to get to be convinced I got one message through. And I was like, this is why I don't want to be on my phone. Like, I don't want to be spending all this time having to get a message through and worrying if the message through. I just want to switch off. So that was the extent. So I did set that goal. And then it extended to some part when I got back to Bowdernath, to be honest. I felt so refreshed and blessed by not being in this negative news cycle. I decided to only focus on Nepal news for my last week. And I actually actively sought to avoid catching up on UK and US news for an additional week. I realized I couldn't change what's going on in those countries. And I understand the need to stay informed. I just said, I'm taking an extra week. I'm going to stay local. And when I get back to the States, I'll start catching up properly on what has or has not been going on in my absence.
Yeah, the whole idea of, my opinion, at least, of this, we need to stay informed. We need to be informed. We do. But do we need to stay informed at the rate that we're informed? Even just the radio listener, like here in Norway, for example, the news comes on the national radio station like once every hour. And I just still argue, do we need to know the news even once every hour? I mean, big things happen, of course, and then you can understand why, hey, let's all find out what's going on. But there's things happening all the time. And it's just an endless deluge. I mean, this isn't judging. It's just that I feel like too much news for myself personally is not good for my mental health. But at the same time, it is very clickable and very easy to find that news and to go to it, even though it's bad. Was there sort of a, they say like a digital detox for a reason, because much like any addiction, you have to kind of detox. There's like a detox period perhaps, and then you kind of enter maybe a different sort of state. I mean, did you feel like there were sort of like levels to this? Like, did you actually have to settle in and slow your brain down? What did that look like? How did you, it sounds like you felt great coming out of it, but then now it's maybe creeping back in. Yeah. Like, what's been sort of the arch for you?
That's an important question. people always say, that's a great question. But I mean, I think that's an important question. I did plan this reasonably well in the sense that I said, I'm going to do work in Bauda for a week. And I was sort of able to do it. And when I got to that Bauda and around the stupa, I actually did not feel the need. I thought during that first week, let me go to, again, I mentioned Bhoktapar, let me go into Kathmandu and see what happened, what the damage is to these government buildings. All of that waited until my last week. I was very comfortable. I felt like, not to make this too grandiose, but I did feel a sense of homecoming. I felt very at home around that stupa, like really at home. I found a place, lots of places where I could take my manuscript and work on it. And so a few hours work a day. I wasn't doing the 8 hours work a day in Nepal, but I got the work done on the first and last weeks. And that first week allowed me to settle in, plan my trek, and start sort of just being, okay, this cycle of negativity, this horrible administration that we have in the States that's committing harm to people and reveling in it, and is not the country I chose to move to, and not the country I thought would sort of be going this way. That is now several thousand miles away, and like literally about the other side of the world. And I can, I'm not seeing people devouring American news here. I don't have to. I cannot. They're not talking about it. They're not devouring it. So if I stay off the social media, I don't have to either. So that first week really helped me prep for the trek. The trek obviously took a fair amount of online research, and I'm very prone to. I think this is a human thing that probably so many of your listeners will identify with, and I'm sure other guests have talked about trying to battle it. By giving myself a week to plan the trek, I managed to talk myself out of it several times. Like why don't I just do what everybody else is doing? Why am I always choosing the hard way? And of course, as I found when we took that round the world trip, when you're not on your trip, it looks daunting. Once you undertake the trip, and I'm talking about getting on the plane to go somewhere, but I'm also talking about leaving my hotel and starting the trek. Once you actually get out and do that thing that you wanted to do, you realize you can do it. You can talk yourself out of it. And that was definitely going on. It's particularly, I had jet lag at both ends because it is like almost a 12-hour time difference. And I was waking in the middle of the night over for the first 5 nights over in Bowdernath. Another reason I'm really glad I didn't go straight on the trek. And during that couple of hours, I'd be awake during the evening, the middle of the night before getting back to sleep. I'd sort of be able to talk myself out of this trek. And then, of course, when I woke up properly, had my coffee, whatever, I'd get back into it. But on that, you're talking about the detox and planning it. I ended up detoxing in other ways I didn't expect as well. I mean, a couple of nights in, I was like, there's craft beer here in Nepal now. There wasn't 9 years ago. And there's this like outdoor little bar with right next to the Sherpa kitchen, right outside my little guest house. I'll have a local beer. Maybe I'll sleep better. I had a local beer. It was fine, Jason. I didn't sleep better. So I was like, I don't need to have alcohol on this trip. Definitely not on the trek. And then I found myself like the Nepalese really love their coffee, and they train a lot of baristas. That's a whole other conversation, but it's becoming like an export skill. And so there's like good coffee all the way around the stupa. And I was like doing that because I'm a coffee hound. Once I got on the trek, I realized Nescafe or tea, I'll have the tea. And then I'd be off trekking. And next I knew I'd given up coffee as well. And so it was like, it was
coffee.
really,
Let's not get carried away here.
I know,
Tony.
no,
Come on.
I know. I had coffee this morning to prep for you, but it was really interesting. I think I scaled back on the caffeine on a level that's probably really, really good for me. So there were unintended benefits. I hadn't gone into the trip expecting that to happen. I mean, I knew I wouldn't want to drink on the trek because you get up into altitude and it was going to be a lot of work, but I didn't really expect that to happen. So it wasn't a forever. It wasn't a, oh, right, this has reset me for life, because it hasn't, but it certainly knocked me back down, knocked me healthily back down the ladder in a really, really good way, and made me realize that when your goal is to get up in the morning, and go out and walk in the beautiful Himalaya, one cup of tea, maybe two, That's all you need. Then you got sunshine, and then you're in a good mood, and all's good with the world.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of value in just the, the temporary reset even, or just, the lessons around, like you said, like the sort of the snowball effect of where's this detox from X, Y, or Z thing going to take me? And there's like some unintended positive benefits to that as well. So it's a worthwhile experiment to undertake, whether it's from your telephone or, something else. I feel like it does add to the travel experience. I mean, obviously you go to a different place, you're completely changing your surroundings, and there's all of that comes with travel. But then if you add the layer of sort of experimentation and you break from your sort of daily habit routine, which you do when you're traveling, but you still have things you can incorporate, right? Like coffee and, I can get up and check my email. There's still things that you can do on the road. But if you take those things away too, that just adds another layer to the exploration of self, I think, out on the road.
It really, really does. It really, really does. And this extends in other ways that you may or may not be planning to ask me. I mean, choosing to talk with people, choosing to read a book in a tea house as opposed to being on your phone invites conversation. And then you get recommended other books. And then somebody's talking about the books they're reading. And maybe you're showing each other your books. I would certainly advocate, I'm a writer, but I'm aware that, people are reading less books these days. They're reading less literature, magazines in general. And so obviously I'm going to advocate that. That's one aspect. I also sort of loaded up. I figured that I'd be doing a lot of trekking on my own because I did this solo and unsupported, meaning no guide, no porter. And I figured there would be large chunks of days when I wasn't talking with other people. So I sort of loaded up the podcasts, and I got 5 minutes through a podcast that I love that's about my football team, my soccer team. And I was like, wrong place, wrong place. And I wasn't going to be downloading new ones because that would bring me back into the news cycle. So I put I made sure I had some downloaded, and I was just like, nah, I'm not going to be watching. I won't know the scores while I'm away, so I don't need to listen to the podcast. And so I didn't want to listen to music either. So for that 2 weeks, all I actually listened to were a few talks from the Zen Mountain Monastery, which I used to attend back in Mount Tremper in the Catskills. And there was a sense of familiarity. And even though that particular Zen tradition is more the Japanese, China, more the Eastern tradition, and I was in a Tibetan Buddhist area, there were still enough connections. A couple, some of those talks made sense, but even there, I listened to less of those than I expected. So there was a lot of golden silence and a lot of really golden talking to people as well.
Nice. Yeah, that's an interesting specific example of the book versus the phone thing, which is, you're still consuming, you're still sitting in a cafe. It's just one thing is changing, and that leads to a whole other chain reaction of experiences. We'll get back to the interview in just a moment.
The new LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't undo your last hire, the no-show. Who set you back because they didn't show up on day one, or day two, or ever again. And now your product launch is delayed because you're talking to alien abduction podcasters to track them down. But LinkedIn Hiring Pro can help make sure your next hire sticks. In fact, businesses who use LinkedIn are 24% less likely to reopen a role in the next 12 months. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
The award-winning American Airlines Advantage program rewards more than travel. It takes your whole life to new heights. Earn miles when you fly, as well as with thousands of your favorite brands. And then redeem those miles for flights, upgrades, and experiences worldwide. Advantage members also enjoy earlier boarding and free high-speed Wi-Fi in flight. Join for free and start earning towards your next adventure at aa.com/Spotify.
Now, back to the show. The way you approached the trek was something I had fantasized about before I went to Nepal, was starting in Kathmandu, and rather than sort of like taking transportation to the trailhead, which most people do, just like, well, why don't I just walk out of my hotel room and just go start trekking, and then I'll meet the trek when it's supposed to be, and then you can acclimatize, you can get a workout, you can walk through places most people aren't walking through. I didn't do it. Maybe I regret it. I don't know yet. I have to think about that. I try not to have any travel regrets, but you did do this. And, we can talk about this specifically to Nepal, but, there's trekking and different things like this all over the world. And, we think about bridging the gap between and a lot of times it's just like a time constraint, right? You're on the ground in X, Y, or Z, base, city, town, whatever, and you want to do this excursion. And then there's the gap the physical gap in between that, which often involves, all right, well, we have to get all the tourists or the travelers there. So we're going to transport them this way or whatever. But you bridge that gap by walking it. And I wanted to hear about that experience. You basically walked out of your hotel room to go on your trek instead of going to the trailhead with everybody else when they went.
I did, and I'm just trying to look here because it's a book I got out of the library that had a nice tour of Nepal that it maybe the library didn't expect it to have when I was going. And have I found it? I do believe. Good, I found it. So I want to give credit here to the book. It's by Robin Balstead, Nepal Trekking and the Great Himalaya Trail. I think that's the book. But it was really a book for trekkers. It wasn't a guidebook that says, hey, you can go on the Langtang trek and you can go to Annapurna Base Camp or Everest Base Camp. And maybe I can also give you reasons I chose not to do other treks and why I chose Langtang. And so I've got those other books, and some of those other books are not great for the trekking. This was like it had layouts of elevation gains and daily routes, and I felt like, okay, this is a good book to take with me. And early in the book, it said, that you can even walk out of your hotel in Kathmandu and start the Langtang trek. And that stuck with me. And it's not when I read these chapters about it's sort of the Hembaloo trek as well, where from you start at the national park on the northeastern end of the city, where the city sort of gives up, where it's flat and starts climbing. Well, what most people do, Jason, is, and by most people, I'm talking about probably 99.9% of Western trekkers, they take a bus from Kathmandu at 6 a.m. or so up to a place called either Dunche or further up Sirapur-Brazi, and that's like a direct northern 8-hour bus journey, and doesn't cover what you would cover in 8 hours in the States or Norway. But anyway, it is a long bus journey. And you then join the Langtang trek, and you go from west to east, and you start climbing, and you get to a point on the east, a place called Kyunchingomba, which I went to, which is actually quite a big place. It's more like a small town than just a few tea houses or a large village. And if you want to continue from there, you need to be an expert. You need tents. You're not going to do that on your own. But the Langtang trek, that part is very doable. And so what a lot of people do to make more of it is when they come back west, they diverge south. It's a bit more angular than that. It kind of goes from northwest down to southeast. And they come down over through the Gozang-Kunda Lake, which is a sacred lakes at 4,000 plus meters, and then over the Loribrina Pass and down towards Kathmandu, towards this national park. And some of them skip out at the moment there's a road and they get a jeep back to Kathmandu. That is really, really popular, and I think it's beautiful. And the reason most people do it coming down is because going up involves an awful lot of climbing. And I instead read this book, and the idea that I could walk out of the hotel and be at the national park, a taxi would have cost me like in dollars, like $5 at the most, maybe $3 to get to the national park. That wasn't the point. On a Saturday morning, I got up, put my backpack on, circumambulated the stupa once, which was great because I remembered the things I'd forgotten. Went back, picked those up, and headed. But because I was in the northeast of the city already, I didn't have to deal with the worst of the traffic, and headed up sort of relatively quiet streets to the national park. It was only 2 hours for me, and then I started climbing. And I was the only Westerner I met doing that all the way up to the Loribrina Pass. So there are people who do that Hembulu. I may have mispronounced that. I'm sorry. The Hembulu trek, which kind of goes up the first 3 days I did, and then sort of takes a loop and comes back down. So I had plenty of company for the first 3 days, but then from there to going over the Lorobrina Pass to Gozang-Kunda, nobody from the West does it that way. And I did feel very unique doing that. So even though you're told you can do it, very, very few people do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a great, just overarching principle for travelers, that there are, even in popular places and on popular excursions, there are unique ways to do it where it's still off the beaten track, so to speak. Yeah. Do you want to give us your advice for choosing a trek in Nepal? Sounds like you did some research on several.
Absolutely. The three most popular are Annapurna Base Camp, Everest Base Camp, and Langtang. Annapurna Base Camp, you go from Pokhara, and it's very attractive because Pokhara is lovely, and I seem to remember it's a short bus ride to the start of the trek. Trek's not that hard. Our 11-year-old kid did it. I mean, it is hard. I shouldn't underplay that. The trekking is hard, particularly when you get confronted with those bloody steps. And as a trail runner, I'm like, give me like slippery rocks any day. Just the endless going up steps where you can't choose, that you can't choose your footstep. It's chosen for you. None of them are easy, but Annapurna and Langtang, having done them both, my 11-year-old could probably have done the west to east part, the part that most people do. And so Langtang, it's that bus ride from Kathmandu, and people do it, or they take a Jeep, which is marketed now as an electric vehicle. So that seems attractive. So they take that, although it's not much quicker. And in terms of my choosing, I had no interest in climbing Mount Everest itself, quite apart from the fact I don't have, $100,000 to drop on it. I just see it as vainglorious, ruining the planet, like everything that's bucket list wrong with society. And excuse me, I am judging. But, I'll leave the mountains to the mountaineers. Everest Base Camp, I got the impression that it's just like what people want to do, and they can say they went to Everest Base Camp. And that was sort of confirmed to me. And I did meet a lovely English woman on my first night at my guest house who was having dinner on the terrace roof. And she was sort of recommending it. As it turned out, that cyclone I mentioned earlier on did some really major damage to the treks, and it closed the airport that most people fly into from Kathmandu to start the Everest Base Camp trek for 4 whole days, right when I got there, stranding, understandably, hundreds, if not thousands of trekkers. People had to be rescued off Annapurna circuit trek, and there were 2 avalanches that killed mountaineers. So I arrived in the middle of some unexpected serious weather. So Everest was discounted anyway. And although this English person said, you can actually also walk to where that airport is. I mean, it'll take you 4 or 5 days, but if you want to walk the whole thing, you can. And that there was a different route to go where I wouldn't end up at Everest Base Camp. And that's too much. That's just, it's not what's calling me. I've done Annapurna. I felt that to redo it would be risky based on how much we loved it in 2016. And I like the idea of doing something new. And then I just got sold on the idea of, am I crazy enough to put on an enormously overweight backpack? And if people want advice, don't do what I did. I mean, there are items you can leave behind. And, I've actually made a list of them and weighed them, and they ended up being 6 or 7 pounds. I mean, that was an enormous amount of extra weight to be carrying when you're climbing. But I just thought, am I mad enough to go do this? Yes, I am. Let's do it. But I do believe that Langtang, if somebody is like, okay, this guy's crazy, I'm not going to do that climbing, but taking that bus and either choosing to go with a guide or a porter or both, you can easily do Langtang, and you will thoroughly, thoroughly enjoy it. In the entire time I was on the trek, and I'm very chatty, as listeners might realize. I talk to so many people. I'd always be asking, I'd say namaste. You always say namaste to people you greet. And I would typically ask them what country they were from. I was just genuinely interested. And I only met one grumpy person the entire trip. Unfortunately, I seemed to get landed with them for a couple of days because we were on the same route. Everybody else just looked radiant. Even if they looked physically tired, they looked radiant.
Nice. Okay. I will also plug the trek I did, the Manaslu trek, which was a great walk. And we did it in like 2014, I believe. Yes, we have a whole podcast about it I can link to if people are curious about that. Yeah, I mean, trekking in Nepal, of course, one of the big life list things for a lot of people. So just thought that was worth touching on. I mean, I know you did this, you were there solo. It sounds like you're kind of, let's say, settling back into society, if you will, coming off of a trip like this, transitioning from, being on the road and being disconnected and all those things back. I mean, now that you're kind of looking back, what are some of the other lessons? Was there anything else from that trip that you wanted to share here that you thought would be worthwhile for people listening, whether they're planning a trip to Nepal specifically, or just travel advice or life advice or anything like that you want to share?
I think I mentioned the aspects that's so familiar, which is you're going to worry about a trip in advance. You're going to worry about a trek in advance. You're going to second guess yourself about what you brought with you, per me bringing things I didn't need to bring. You're going to wonder if you should have hired that guide, if they're as good as they could be, ditto with the porter, or if you go unsupported. And I need to give a caveat in a minute that's important and tells a lovely story as well. So can we circle back to that? But you're going to second guess yourself. But the bottom line is start. And once you start, it all falls into place. And I was really trying to do this living in the moment, as in, what's past is past, and you learn from it. Like every day, you just sort of learn. Did that food work with me? Was the cup of tea better than the coffee? You apply that to the next day. But once you're in the moment, you're like, I'll get to my destination today, and there's going to be another destination. There's always going to be a tea house to stay at. People who don't know, the Nepal is these treks, all of them. There are tea houses all over these mountains and rural areas, and you just sort of walk until you get to another little. It might only be 2 tea houses. That might be the village. So you're looking on your map, and it's like, oh, I'm coming to a village, and the village is 2 tea houses next to each other that both want you to stay over. There are some things I want to mention that may be attractive to people, without getting into sort of economy of scale and why a Coca-Cola, and I tend to use that as a good example because it's universal, might cost X dollars, X, is it kroner in Norway?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I got that. And then it will cost like 1/4 in Nepali rupees, even though ostensibly it's the same drink. But it is very inexpensive once you pay that flight to be in Nepal. I was staying in beautiful accommodation for $25 a night. I'm vegan. I love Nepali food. I mean, that's another reason to go there. I was just in love with the food, and I ate so clean and healthy there. But I sort of found a place off the stupa that I did not, quote, find when we were there 9 years ago, because we probably weren't there enough, called Uppala, that is an outdoor vegetarian, vegan place that's really quite large, welcomes you to work there during the day, has this amazing food. And only on the last night, when I was like, there's still items on the menu I haven't tried, and I've got to have momos again, did I get over 1,000 rupees for my meal, and that's $7.50. And that was like a 4-course meal. And on the trek itself, you barely pay for your accommodation. They make their money on just the fact that you're doing food with them. So the understanding is you get to a tea house, you check how much they want to charge you for a room. I did not pay more than 1,000 rupees for a room. At any of these treks, that's again only about $7.50, $8, sorry, convert if you can. And the food would generally be between about 1,500 and 3,000 rupees. So again, I'm only paying for the entire trek per day, $25 or so. And I did actually do a spreadsheet that included all my elevation and my daily trekking because I wanted to. And over the cost of the trek. Now, this includes hiring a porter to get me over the pass, and that was a big expense. And including a couple of national park fees and including the bus back from Sirupur-Brezi, because I came down the way most people would go up on that bus, averaged out to just about $30 a day. And I was having the time of my life. So I do want to say, although Nepal's a poor country and people should be earning more, et cetera, if you can afford the airfare, which is a big if, a massive if, then this is a very inexpensive place to be, and you will eat so well. And, and the people as well. It's a very sort of standard traveler tourist trope to be like, and the people are so friendly. But if you've been to a lot of places, and I genuinely and generally think like most people are good and most people will want to look after a traveler and just make sure they're comfortable. But it's on another level in Nepal. People are just astonishingly friendly. They're very hard to anger, which makes sort of the actions of September and the revolution more interesting. But I got into just, Nepali people often would gravitate to me, especially young people. I got into lots of great conversations. So I'm advocating that in general. I'm advocating to start your trip in general. Just do it. It'll fall into place. And Nepal in particular, if you want to go trekking. And all those, like you mentioned, Manaslu, I met people who come every year, people who it's my 15th time in Nepal, and they do different treks. I'd love to go to the Dolpo, to Manaslu, to all these different places. And I suspect I probably will in years to come. And I also met on my very last day, coming down, almost as if he was put there by fate, an English guy, and I guess probably about 70 now, who spends 6 months of a year just living at this one tea house. It's like a farm stay, because he was there when the earthquake hit and he bonded with the family. And now he's spending half his year, he's just hanging out there. He just had a hip replacement and he's just hanging out there, being at peace with the world. It's beautiful.
I love that. It's always special when you find a place in the world that you feel so strongly about, that you feel like you could come to and it resonates with you and it feels like some version of home on some level. And, when you find those places, it's a gift. And then I love to hear that people like these random people out in the world, just, I like to think about some guy that's bonded with a family that's just living in some village for, half the year. This is like, there's, all these people that, if they're not talking about it on social media or whatever, like you never hear about them. And I just love that. I love to hear
I love it as
stories.
well. It was a little like kind of climbing a mountain and finding a yogi sitting at the top, in meditation. It was coming down, but it was indeed a sort of beautiful thing. And maybe, people who've been on these treks will know the tea houses are not glamorous. There's a reason they only charge you like $5 to stay there. One good thing about traveling solo is that every single night I get given a twin room. And I could steal the blanket from the other bed, which saved me. I did not bring a sleeping bag with me, which most people advise because it gets so cold at night. Only one place on my second night did the owner not let me use that second blanket. Everybody else was just like, the room is yours. And the very few of them have really functional showers. The higher up you get, the less functional they get. But there were exceptions. When I stayed in the new Langtang village, because I should absolutely, it would be, I wouldn't want to not mention this. The actual village of Langtang was destroyed in the 2015 earthquake. Hundreds of people lost their lives, including dozens of trekkers, 10 soldiers, hundreds of locals. There is a Netflix movie, I think called Aftershock, or documentary about what happened to some of those people, the trekkers, some mistakes they made trying to come out of that. There's a new Langtang village, and so the buildings are new. And Langtang would have been my penultimate stop on the heading east up that west to east trek. And I loved the place so much, and my backpack was doing my head in so much that I stayed there 3 nights. And for the next 2 days, I walked and unbelievably, really, the next day actually jogged up to Gyeongchang-gumba. and came back again in the evening. Now, maybe I've got, I'm an ultra runner, so I've got extra miles available on my legs, but that worked for me. It's nice to have an in-room shower that actually has hot water. So sometimes you are sleeping, it looks unbelievably rough, but you're only really in there to sleep, because you spend your evening in the warm dining room where there's a fire raging and talking to other people, and then you run out and quickly get under the bed covers, and in the morning you kind of get up, it's super cold, and you run in and get a cup of hot tea, and all's okay with the world. And if you can bury yourself under the extra blanket during the night, you'll probably get to sleep.
Love it. Where can everybody find your stuff? We can remind them one more time, invite people to get in touch if they have more questions about traveling in Nepal or anything. Yeah, just give people
absolutely. I've really tried to focus myself now on away from, like I say, social media, and I gave up my own website. It is tonyfletcher.substack.com. That's pretty easy to remember. And I think most people are aware of Substack, which started out as a newsletter distribution where people with followings can earn from their subscribers. It's turning more social media, which is disappointing a lot of us. But at the bottom line, come on over. Please hit the subscribe button. I only post twice a week, and that'll land in your email box. And there are the free subscriptions. Every now and then I'll put something up that's like an interview transcript from one of the books I've written that I think is that's for the paid subscribers. But there's lots there. I do write about my travels, and that is where people can find me. There's a couple. There was a couple of things you asked that I didn't quite answer. There is one tip I want to give people when they're on a trek.
Okay.
Never stand on the cliffside of a donkey train, like a mule train.
Good advice.
Particularly, don't do that. You'll notice the guides don't do that, and the other porters don't do that. Particularly, don't get your phone out to film them, which is pointless anyway, because you've already said you're not going to post on social media, and you've seen donkey trails before. Because 1 week into my trek, I decided to do that, and one of the donkeys went, "No photos today, please," swished its tail and knocked my phone out of my hand and over the edge of the trail.
Oh my gosh.
And I did not find it after an hour. And I had, at that point, got cut up badly by bamboo. I had all these like sticky things that this is this weird little plant that sticks to every item of your clothing.
Phone was taking the no phone thing literally. It was like, I'm out of here.
And believe me, when I was trying to look for it, I was like, when I said I was like switching off, I didn't intend to lose this phone I just bought from my son quite so quickly. And how am I going to get through the rest of the week? I had actually given up when I came back out of this. I mean, it wasn't a cliff edge, but it was a hill. I came back up one more time. I was always like checking my backpack was okay, and I'm putting gloves on. Father and daughter from Israel came by with a young guide. He actually asked me what the problem was, asked them if they would mind if he spent a few minutes trying to help me. He found it in 2 minutes and saved my experience. And the best part about it is when the phone landed, you would assume it landed on its face or its back. It actually landed upright in between a couple of branches. I managed to film me looking for it for an hour. Like, I'm here. It was 5 gigs worth. It took up 80% of my battery, but it is a pretty hilarious film.
Oh my goch, you got to put a time lapse of that on your Substack.
Yeah, maybe the time lapse is the way to do
it. With that sort of piano, old timey music.
Yeah.
It's your phone was not to be denied. It was like, no, you must use me. I'm now going to shoot video that you're going to use somewhere on
there was that as well. I mean, I was really having to think how I was going to deal with this, and I was trying to just be in terms of looking for it as well. And I was looking in the wrong place. I thought it had gone further downhill, which was ironic. So, but that's the risk you take when you go solo and unsupported. Because if I'd had a guide, they would have said, we always stand on the uphill side, of the mule trains and give them space. And also, if I was traveling with anybody else, I suspect they would have gone, no, I saw it. Your phone's there. You know, two eyes are better than one. So it was just me. So that's mildly understandable. And you also asked about sort of the easing back in. And like I say, I found it personally fascinating that last week in Baudo, I was back on email, but I got back on a Friday evening and I said, you know, if I take this holiday thing seriously, I don't need to be on email till Monday. And I was sort of worried about all this work stuff I may have missed, and there was almost none, which maybe says I'm not working enough or that I told people I was going away. And I got email headers with my New York Times that sort of told me, you know, Trump hadn't died in the meantime. And, you know, I figured I'd have known that. And I was like, okay, there's the same old. But I did decide that last week I'm not going to do the news thing. And I'm just going to enjoy this last week, do my emails, make sure I get my work done. And then coming back, you know, to New York, it's like, well, I can't avoid it now, but I can reduce it. And I'm really glad you caught me now, you know, a few weeks after the trek. I am planning on writing about this in not Substack form as much as hopefully some kind of book form. There's a lot I learned on this trip, and I have really, really scaled back. I came back a changed person, and the news is still terrible, whether it's Bondi Beach, whether it's Brown, whether it's people murdering their parents. You know, the news is, and that's not counting the politicians even, the news remains negative, and we have to have some engagement to be able to affect that. But it's not probably coincidental that I found myself coming back with quite a well-known book called How to Not Be a Buddhist, which actually refers to that, the extent to which one should be informed, but you know, your Buddha nature would be better used, you know, spreading the compassion and kindness than joining in the shouting and the, you know, the shouting and this equal cycle of negative anger that we're demonstrating a lot in society at the moment.
Well, I think that CTA is a good place to finish. Tony, thanks for your time. We'll link up to all the things and look forward to staying in touch.
Oh, absolutely, Jason. Thanks so much for having me on again. I really appreciate it. I love the show.
Cheers. There you have it. Thank you to Tony Fletcher for stopping by the show. Check out his Substack. And I also want to thank Airwave Media. We're part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network now, which is super exciting. You can go to airwavemedia.com to check out some of the awesome shows they have over there. Now, I'm going to leave you with this quote from Thomas Edison, who said, "If we did all the things we are capable of, we would literally astound ourselves." I wanted to leave you with that one. I like that. I really like that. Astound ourselves. I sometimes tend to underestimate what I can do, and I have to remind myself of the things that I have accomplished and not get down on myself about the things that I haven't. And so perhaps coming out of this one, maybe a good way to remind ourselves of what we're capable of is taking a moment to reflect on some of the accomplishments that we've had in our lives, the things that we've been able to do. We're often underestimating ourselves, and we forget what we've done already, how far we've come. And when we take a moment to reflect on how far we've come and some of the things we've done, we can say, wow, I can do hard things, as they say. I'm capable of a lot, maybe even more than I think. And that's why I wanted to finish with that. I think that's a way in to going and tackling the next thing with some confidence by reflecting on what you've done and remembering, hey, I am a person who has had accomplishments and has gotten things done and has been able to get out of my comfort zone and overcome things. And I can do it again. So we can finish with that unplanned rant. I'll read the quote one more time by Thomas Edison. If we did all the things we're capable of, we would literally astound ourselves. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Peace and love to you. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by ZeroToTravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.
Via Podcast is a travel podcast by AAA Mountain West that goes beyond destinations to uncover the stories that make places unforgettable. Hosted by Michelle Donati and Mitty Hicks, the show explores the American West through fascinating stories of history, culture, wildlife, folklore, and adventure. This season features stories about Route 66, wolves in Montana, Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest, and much more. If you love great storytelling and discovering the hidden side of the places around us, search for Via Podcast. That's the letters VIA Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts.